Okay, I forgot to start recording until about 5 or 6 minutes into the class. For those of you who are watching the recording, please note the announcement that I made about grading. And make sure that you understand that and you follow those rules. Anyhow, let's look at this example. I brought up this finished page in the browser. As I mentioned before, you have only one page. You don't have a TXT file and a HTML file. We have one HTML file, and we can view that HTML file two different ways. One way is by opening it up in either Notepad, Notepad++, or what I've been using, Visual Studio Code. If you open that up, it allows you to see the innards of the code and make changes to the code. So this is almost like an X-ray to that file. We're seeing the nuts and bolts, everything that goes inside, outside of it. So this would be like an X-ray. When we double click it and it opens it up in the web browser, we see how other people are going to see it in their web browsers. Okay, a lot of this assignment should be review. And we'll take a look at that, and then we'll get into the CSS, because if you notice, this looks a lot different than the version that we had last week. All right, doc type HTML, HTML having a head section and a body section. That's how we've been doing it since the first week. That's how you should do it. Inside the body section, you have the header, and that's meant for the banner on the top of the screen. So if we're looking at the page, that's this stuff. We have our navigation, which is an unordered list, which contains a list of links. When there's a pound sign before the address, that means to go to the section of the page that has that ID. So pound sign mobile takes me to this section of the page, the thing on the page that has an ID of that. All links look the same. They have the start tag, they have the text that you're going to click on, and they have the end tag. All of them will have an href, but the href might look a little different. This one, again, it starts with a pound sign. It means go to that section of the page. This link down here, where it just says the name of the web page that we're going to, is when it's one of my pages that I'm going to. Specifically, a page in the same folder. That's why, again, I suggest you put everything in one folder. We use certain tags to indicate big sections of the page. The header is a header section. The nav is a navigation section. The article is just a section of content. So each of these things, each of these topics has its own article. We have one for programming. The ID is programming, so we'll skip to there. Likewise, we have an article for web programming, mobile, networking. Notice that this is an email link where the href says mail to : and then has an email address. We'll open up they'll open up your email application and start an email to that address. Finally, we have a link to an external site, https android.com. When it starts with https, and then it's the web address after that. Let's follow this link for my C# tutorial. And we go to this page. And the only difference of this page from last time is that we styled it differently. That's what we're going to cover in a minute. and we have an image on the page. Let's look at the image first. Let's see how we create an image. Web page. Let's open up that second file. There's a new tag for images. We haven't covered before. And that is the IMG tag. The IMG tag doesn't have an end tag, so usually we do this. Or there's no reason to have an end tag, so usually we do this, which means that this image tag is a start and end tag rolled into one. That's how the slash is before the greater than sign. The SRC is the name of the image file. And again, we're going to start out by putting everything in the same folder. So in this case, SRC equals 1.jpg. If we look in that folder, there is 1.jpg. That's why I've said you have to put everything in that folder that you're going to zip up and send to me when you're complete. You can't just send me the HTML code. You need to send me any CSS you have, any images that you have. The other thing is there's an alt attribute, which is used by people that are using assistive technology. That is a screen reader. And it's just a brief description of what the image is. Now, that's certainly not the same as actually being able to see the image, but at least it gives them an idea of what the image represents. For example, in a sporting event, if you have a picture of someone kicking the winning field goal, you can say, the kicker's kicking a winning field goal here for the Chiefs or whatever. All right. That way, at least, even though the person can't see the image, at least you give them an idea of what the image is. So that's how we put an image on the page as content. IMG, we have a source attribute and alt attribute. Again, these aren't separate tags. These are attributes. They are extra things that we put inside the image tag. In other words, it's not enough to just say that we have an image. We have to say an image of what? Okay. And in this case, it's the name of the file. Any questions about that? Anyone outside in TV land have a question about that? Okay, now let's get into CSS. CSS is a second language, all right? And we normally put it in a separate file. And we link to that file this way. We put in our head section, so this is another thing that belongs in the head section, a link tag, type text CSS, rel equals style sheet, that will always be it is, href is the location of the file, and file site.css, well, that's the name of the file in this folder. That assigns this style sheet that's defined here, to work for this page. And we put it in a separate file because we're going to use that style sheet on a bunch of different pages. In our case, both our pages use the same style sheet file. This is our second page, finish.html and tutorial.html. They both have this link to this CSS file. It tells both of these pages use the CSS code in this file to style the pages. By style, I mean the appearance of the page, the colors, the fonts, and so on down the line. So first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put this tag in all of your web pages. This name can vary. It doesn't have to be site.css. These other two have to be what I have shown here. Then you need to create a file that matches that name. Site.css, you need to create a file called site.css. Now here's the way that this style works. Notice it's a totally different looking language than HTML. This works two different ways, or there's two different aspects to this. First part of it is what's called the selector. I'll put extra, I'll put it on an extra line. The selector is what in the web page gets this style rule. In this case, I'm saying the body gets a background of this color and a text color of this color. Now, you probably don't know what these are. We'll go over the meaning of this in a minute. But you can express the color a number of different ways. One way you can do it is by typing in the name. So if I make the color or the background color red and save this, when I go and refresh the page, background is now red. And the background of the other page is red. Why? Because both of them link to this style file. And I changed it to be the background is red. So let me undo that to get back the nicer color that we had. Style rule consists of a series of attributes and values. So we have a selector that says what gets the style rule. We have the style rule that says what gets changed on the web page from the default. So what we're going to change the background of the body and the text color of the body. There we go, we changed it. We're also going to change the H1s. Here we're changing the H1s to have a different background, a different color for the text, and a different font size. Again, we'll go over what these mean. You can, in addition to using that pound sign, you can type in the name of most colors that exist. There's a whole list of them, and we'll look at those in a minute. What this means is every H1 on the page gets this background color and gets this color for the font. Let's change that to yellow. So now notice all the H1s are blue and they have yellow text. Background is blue. Text is yellow. So it says color, it means the color of the text. Background means the background of it. Let me undo this a couple times to get back to our nice colors. What does font size.4m mean? Well, it means to make the size of the font 4 times as big as it normally is. So if I made this 0.5 m, text is going to be very, very tiny. almost can't read it. Right, but those are my H1s. If I make that big, it can be 10 times the normal size. It's going to be gigantic. If I make it 1 EM, it will make it the normal size. Normal size font for the page. So if I make it 4 AM, that makes it 4 times the normal size of the page. Now, how do you learn these things? The word background, color, font size. Well, you learn it just by doing it over and over again and looking up if there's anything that you want to do that you don't know how to do. One resource that I suggest is the W3 Schools. I can, for example, go to the CSS tutorial and it'll show me examples. That's how you change the color, the background color. You can either say just background or background color. By the way, I usually just abbreviate it as background. This is how you change the text color and the alignment to center alignment. So all these things, this deals with colors. This deals with margins. How do you put space between the things on your page? How do you center your text? Here's how you center your text. Here's how you change the font. So the examples I'm going to go over in class are mostly going to relate to the color, because that's typically, unless you have to be colorblind, in which case let me know. And I'll try to use neutral colors so that you don't have an issue with them. But color is the most obvious thing typically we can change on the page. So my examples are going to be about colors, and that's probably the first thing you'll experiment with. But feel free to experiment with anything else that you want to change on your page. And read through that tutorial to get a list of and to get a sense of all the things that you're allowed to change. For the most part, anything that has to do with the way this page looks, you can change it in CSS. Remember from the discussion last time, we talked about CSS. We talked about the web page having a default appearance. Like an H1 by default is so big, and the body of the page by default is white, and the text on the page by default is black. Well, you can change any of those defaults relating to the colors, the alignment of the text, whatever. You can change that via CSS. That will allow you to make a web page that more accurately or more appropriately meets your vision as a designer of what the web page should look like. Companies spend a lot of money doing things like setting up their colors and defining their look, and they call it branding. Many organizations have a very specific look to it. For example, if we're going to look to Lorain County Community College, we see a lot of blue. Those are kind of our colors, right? It's in the logo. Now, we're learning how to change the color of every single thing on the page, but you don't want to do that, right? Could you imagine how this page would look if this was red and this was green and this was purple? And it would look like a mess. There'd be no way for you to sort of visually organize the data on the page. So you think of a theme for your organization. Apple, on the other hand, very basic colors, black and white. And a very specific font that they use. And again, you do that to sort of brand your organization and the website, and to give a certain feel and to suggest certain things. If we went, for example, to a heavy metal band site, let's look up Ozzy Osbourne. Let's look up what Ozzy's official page looks like. A lot of dark colors. It's black, but it's sort of textured black. I would have guessed it would have been completely black, but again, it is dark because, again, that's sort of the trademark of bands of that genre. Let's look up Barbie's website. We see a lot of pink on their site. Pink and purple and bright colors and so on. Now, could you imagine if you reverse those? Could you imagine if Ozzy Osbourne's webpage was pink and purple and nice pastel colors, and Barbie's was very dark black and white? It just wouldn't make sense for their customers and for their product and the mood that they're trying to create. In this case, I just chose these colors because I thought they were nice colors. All right, I think I made this in the fall, and therefore these are sort of fall colors. Now let's look at how we can express colors. There's several ways you can do this. One way is through the color name. Here's a list of 140 color names you can use. Alice blue, antique white, aqua, beige, azure, aquamarine, and so on down the line. So for example, if I want to make the color lime green on my web page, I could put in here lime green. Save it and look at the page. The headers are lime green. And again, as I said before, both pages get that because both pages are linked to that CSS file. I'm going to undo it. And we're back to that. So that's one way you can change the color. And there's a lot of colors available. The other way, there is another way, in fact, there is, I think, at least 2 other ways, is through the use of what's called the hex code. And if you notice, even when we were looking at these names, there's a little code down here that starts with the # or the hashtag, depending on what you want to call it. If I could put it in here, I get the same color as if I put in lime green. Because that's 2 ways of specifying the same color. All right, 2 different ways of specifying the same color. Let's talk about the second way with the hashtag. These hex codes look like this. There's a pound sign, followed by 6 digits. In some cases, you can only have 3 digits, but we'll primarily talk about using 6 digits. And they look something like this. Let's make one up. All right. Pound sign FF0000. All right, what color is that? Well, you can tell what color it is by separating these 6 numbers into 3 pairs. And the pairs represent how much red, how much green, how much blue is in the color. And this is called hex because that's short for hexadecimal. The digits, unlike our decimal system where the digits are 0 to 9, hex digits go from 00 to FF. So like if you're counting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then in hex, A represents 10, B represents 11, C represents 12, D represents 13, I lost track. E represents 14 and F represents 15. So FF is the highest number that we can go to. So if we look at this, the red is turned up all the way, the green is turned off, and the blue is turned off. So if we combine a red light, green light, no green and no blue, we get red. Sure enough, we get red. Now we can mix and match. If I wanted purple, for example, I could add some blue into the mix. So I could give that FF. So I'm turning the blue all the way up. If I do that, I get purple. Now I can play around with this because there's many shades of purple. If I turn on less blue, for example, AA, remember A is less than F, so this is turning down the blue. My purple is going to look like a reddish shade of purple. If I do the opposite, if I turn down the red and turn up the blue, I get a more blue shade of purple. I turn them up all the way, all 3 of the numbers, I get white. If I turn them all off, I get black. If I turn them all to some middle number, like let's turn it to a. I get gray. Now, if I have the same number repeating, I can get away with only saying it 3 times. I'll produce the same thing. I can also we'll skip that one for now, the third way that you can define colors. Now, here's the good news. All right. You look at all this and say, this might be overwhelming. How did you come up with this color scheme? It looks nice, but did you just experiment to come up with those colors, or what did you do to come up with this color scheme? And the answer is I used a resource that generates good color schemes. There's a science to colors. All right, there's things called as complementary colors and so on. And some people can pick out by eye colors that go together, but some of us need a little assistance. And that's where we can use a color scheme generator. So what I did when I did this is I went to Googled HTML color scheme generator. And the one I think I like is this one. And here's how you use it. First of all, several styles you can use. You can use monochromatic, where everything is the same shade of a different color. For example, in this case, these are all reds. All of these are different shades of red. There's darker and there's lighter. I move to orange, I move to yellow, I move to green, blue, purple, so on. So they're all shades of the same color. That's what monochromatic means, one color. I can also use what are called adjacent colors. These are colors that are close to each other on the color wheel, but not all the same shade. So notice here we have our sort of our reddish, and here we have our purplish, and so on, and we can mix and match. Third one we have are what are called triad colors, tetrad colors, and so on. Let's keep it simple, and let's pick a different monochromatic shade. So we go, let's say this is spring semester, so let's look to make it green. I can go and look for the kind of green that I want. Let's say I want that kind of green. If I click preview, what's that's doing? Click examples. There's a sample web page of how it's going to look. Here we can actually see the colors that it creates. And underneath it, it's a little hard to see. It's a little ironic that a website that does colors, the colors are actually so hard to see. But if right underneath it, we can change, it gives us the hex code. So this one is 609732. I can make this 609732. And I can make this one BAE 397. And this color, maybe I will make shade, which is 3E7213. I can save it, and our web page now looks like this. All right. We can go to our home page. So again, this gives us colors that are at least a reasonably good match. You can then tweak them if you want to, or extend it, or do whatever you want based on this. And again, because we put the style information in its own page, its own file, we change it in one place, both of these pages are linked to it, so we get those color changes on both pages. The other way to do this is you can do what's called RGB code, which instead of using hexadecimal uses numbers. So for example, this one is 186, 227, 151. So I could put in for this (186, 227). Five one. And we get that same color. Same color for this as we did before. Now here's the good news too. In addition to the colors that we may use a color generator to pick up and sort of the theme color of our website, we can always use white, black, or a shade of gray if we want to. So for example, I could make the color of this page, instead of using this color, I could make the color of the page black if I thought that was more readable. Now the colors, again, serve two roles. The first role is they sort of give the website a feel. All right, you sort of use the matches the brand of the organization that's creating the site. And the other thing is it uses, it allows us to visually organize the page. Even if I take off my glasses, which I can't see well at all, I can see that there are 3 sections to this page. Something up here, there's something over here, there's something over here. And if I scroll down, actually there's more than 3 sections. So you're going to use colors not just to show off, not just to have pretty colors on the page. I mean, that's all well and good. But we're going to use them to try to communicate something, whether it be the feel of the site, the mood of the site, or whether it's to help us visually organize the information on the page. That's what good use of colors are. So probably not going to use a lot of them. This color scheme generator gives us 2, 3, 4, 5 colors. When you include white, black, and the shades of gray, that gives you a whole bunch of different colors to work with. And that probably will be enough for any web page. All right. This is where the semester starts to get fun for some students because you can now express your individuality and you don't have to make all your pages look identical to everyone else's pages. Provided you know how to link a HTML page to a style sheet and how to create that style sheet. Are there any questions? All right, that's all I had for today. I'm going to be in the lab in a couple minutes. You can come to lab in person if you want. You can join me virtually in the same address in my virtual classroom. So we'll see some of you in lab and some of you we will see next week. So have a good one.